Welcome to Adapt or Perish, the podcast about adaptation. This is episode 8, Fun Home, by Alison Bechdel. In this episode, we read Alison Bechdel's comic memoir and went to a performance of the Broadway musical that was based on it. We definitely want to tackle more musicals in the future, and we like the format that we hit on for today's episode. If you have any thoughts about it, let us know at adaptorperishcast@gmail.com. We want to know what everybody thinks about it. But before we get to it, let's talk about our next episode. So we know that 2017 was just a non-stop roller coaster of progress and optimism. So we thought we'd celebrate the current climate with it's just a romp, just a hoot and a half. Adapt or Perish is doing The Handmaid's Tale because we're tired of being so happy. That's my joke that I just did about The Handmaid's Tale. But for real though, it's a classic. I mean, it's an absolute classic, and more important now than ever. For this episode, we read the book, which was great. We watched the first season of the current Hulu show, which was also great, and we watched the 1990 movie starring Natasha Richardson and Robert Duvall, which was a movie. We're looking forward to everyone hearing it, but for now, let's settle in and discuss Alison Bechdel's Fun Home. This one's gonna get real, everybody. Welcome to Adapt or Perish, the podcast about adaptation. My name is Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Arielle Lipshaw.
And we are here to talk to you about a little musical. Yeah, it's a musical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is going to be a different episode because I think this is the first one we've done where we have not taken in any video content.
Well, we haven't watched. There's no movies.
There's no movies.
We had to watch a little video content.
Right, there's no movies and no TV.
Yeah.
Because we are talking today about Fun Home. So Fun Home is a comic book from 2006. It was published, and the author is Alison Bechdel. And
now, hang on. That name sounds familiar.
Yeah, that name sounds familiar. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Alison Bechdel from her work as the author and illustrator of Dykes to Watch Out For, which was a comic strip that she wrote for 25 years. And if you're not familiar with Fun Home or her subsequent work, Are You My Mother?, you might be familiar with her because she invented the Bechdel test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should talk about the Bechdel test in a couple of minutes, but you did some really cool research on Alison Bechdel.
Yeah. So Alison Bechdel, the story of her life is really told in what we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
So I don't really, it seems really silly to give like biographical details because we're about to spend an hour talking about the biography of her life. But essentially she wrote a book, a comic book about her relationship with her dad and the things that happened to her and her dad and the parallels in their lives. And then it was made into a musical. So both called Fun Home. And the reason it's called Fun Home is because her dad, in addition to several other pursuits, was also a part-time funeral director. That was the family business, was the Bechdel Funeral Home. And they kind of grew up in this sort of weird...
Yeah, calling it the Fun Home.
Mm-hmm. And so in 2013, I want to say, it was made into a musical that ran at the Public Theater in New York off-Broadway and transferred to Broadway, and right now is in a national tour. And we had the opportunity to go and see it here in Boston last week. So we thought, what better opportunity to introduce kind of a new element to our show and talk about something that's not a movie. So we both read the comic book, and we went and saw the musical together.
Now, you'd read it before, right?
Yeah, I had.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I'd never read it.
Yeah.
So this was my first time. It's something I knew you had talked about for a long time, but I had no experience with it.
Yeah.
I'll be totally honest. My experience of Alison Bechdel is the Bechdel test.
So do you want to talk about the Bechdel test? Because people might not know what is the Bechdel test.
All right. So I feel like it's something that gets thrown around a lot. I'm going to say what my understanding of the test is.
Right.
But then I think we should give the test a little context.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the Bechdel test is this. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my understanding is this. If you are watching a movie, you apply this test to it.
Right.
First of all, is there more than one female character?
Correct.
Second, do the female characters, do any two female characters ever have a conversation in the course of the movie?
Right.
That's only them.
Do they ever talk to each other?
Do they ever talk to each other? And 3, is what they talk about something other than one of the male characters in the movie?
Right. About something other than a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Bechdel test,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So the thing about the Bechdel test is that I think it has this sort of reputation as being like this sort of linchpin for like a feminist film. And the thing is, it was a joke from a comic strip called Dykes to Watch Out For, that one of the characters was like, I'm only going to see movies that fit these criteria. And the other characters were like, that's literally no movies. There's no movies that happens. So luckily, things are a little bit better now. And there are some movies that pass the test. And if you go, I think there's a website that you can go to and like it'll tell you like all the new movies every year, like whether or not they pass it.
We'll take a look for it. If we find it, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. But the other thing about it is like, it's not, I think people think of it as an indication of whether a movie is feminist, which is not really the case. It's a minimum standard, not a maximum standard.
Right. Yeah.
So like instead of saying, wow, that movie was so cool, it passed the Bechdel test, what you should be saying is, God, that movie couldn't even pass the Bechdel test.
Right.
And I also learned from some of the research that I did and some interviews that she did that Alison Bechdel herself, her favorite movie does not pass the Bechdel test.
What's her favorite movie?
Groundhog Day.
Yep, there you go.
There you go. So that's about how seriously she takes it. So we should not take it like as divine, instruction from on high. But it is a pretty good way of determining, at least for me, about like a movie that I have no interest in seeing.
It's a good lens.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So did you find anything interesting out about her professional life? Because the play is really about her personal life.
Right.
It doesn't really talk about her professional life.
Right.
And the book.
Yeah. So a couple interesting things. She won a MacArthur Genius Grant in 2014, putting her in the same company as such greats as Lin-Manuel Miranda, who also won a MacArthur Genius Grant.
I have heard of him, yes.
And Fun Home, the musical, was also on the finalist list for the Pulitzer Prize, although it did not win.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't even bother.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
I guess we're done.
We're done here.
Shortest episode ever. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
But some cool stuff about the musical itself. So it was, like I said, it started off Broadway in 2013. With book and lyrics by Lisa Crone and score by Janine Tesori. It was the first all-female writing team of a musical to win Best Original Score.
Oh, cool.
At the Tonys. And it was I heard a lot of people refer to it as the first musical with a lesbian protagonist. I'm going to say it is the first Broadway musical with a lesbian protagonist because I personally have seen a musical about Gertrude Stein. So,
gotcha.
But not on Broadway.
I wonder if anyone at home could hear the look on my face at that statement.
Yeah.
Because the look on my face was basically, is it?
Is it?
There has to be another one.
I don't think so. I mean, try to think of one.
Well, no, I mean, you just...
A Broadway musical, though.
Sure.
Broadway musical.
Yeah.
Musical on Broadway.
Maybe we'll find out later that one actually was.
And something interesting that I found out actually about Alison Bechdel's creative process. Now, she seems like a really private person. Like she lives up in Vermont and just like draws cartoons. But something that I found really interesting is that when she does her more realistic books, like Fun Home, it took her 7 years to do it because for every single frame that you see, she actually takes pictures of herself in that pose and then draws it. And she'll sometimes like even kind of get in the costume of the character and take a picture like on a timer with a camera and then go and sit and draw it. So like it's all drawn exactly from life. And they reference that a little bit in the musical. One of the very first lines that the character Alison says is, "I don't trust memory." Which I think must have come directly from the artist herself. And so that the main thing that I learned about her as far as her process for drawing this book was that everything is strictly true. Like everything is exactly true, like uncomfortably true, like even down to like where the chairs and stuff were in the house.
Yeah, that's one of the things that struck me reading it, is that it's full of so much visual detail. Like, if there's a book sitting on a table, the title of the book is visible.
Right.
If there's a poster on the wall, you know what the poster is of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's nothing that is left to your imagination.
Right. Right, which she does even in like in Dykes to Watch Out For. She does that. Like, the characters work in a bookstore, and like the books all have real titles, and like someone will come in wearing a T-shirt, and the T-shirt will say something on it, and you'll know what the march was or whatever the T-shirt was from.
And like, considering that there's an entire chapter about the period of her childhood where she dealt with OCD,
right?
That kind of makes sense.
Makes sense, and not only that, but like not only dealing with OCD, but like the form that it took was an obsessiveness that what she was saying was true.
Yes.
That she talks about how
it was OCD within her diary.
Yeah, she talks about how after every sentence she would write, I think, because she could never be sure that the thing that she was writing had actually happened, and then that kind of turned into these like sort of a more abstract sort of scribble over her words to indicate that she was like not committing to it because she could never be sure that was absolutely true. So anyway, I feel like we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because we're talking about sort of the more details of the book, but we haven't really talked about what the book is. Do you want to kind of give a summary of what happens in the book that we read?
Yeah, so the book Fun Home is a comic, and it follows, it really takes place throughout her entire life. There's a couple of things that I really liked about the structure of it. It's not a straightforward kind of narrative in terms of timeline.
Right.
She is always present as this kind of omnipotent narrator. But even within a page of the comic, the beginning of the page will start out with a story from her childhood, and then the page will end with a story from her college years.
Right. Or even like her parents' childhood.
Yeah, it jumps around all the time, which is a really nice thing about the structure. But it is essentially about her growing up in this town in Pennsylvania with her family, her parents, and her two brothers. And the whole crux of the story is, when she was in college, she came out to her parents. She discovered that she was a lesbian and really kind of accepted that she was a lesbian.
Yep.
And then within a few months after coming out to her parents, a number of things happened. First, she found out that her father was also closeted. She defines him as gay, which we'll get into.
Right, yeah. She talks about the way that she uses language to describe like how she sees her father.
Right. The way she defines his sexuality is something she talks about, which I think I want to save to the end.
You want to save it to the end?
I would like to save it to the end.
I'm worried we're going to forget to come back to it, and it's very important.
It's one of the like couple of things that I know I wanted to talk about. Cool. So I'm not too worried about it.
Great.
And if we forget, I'll jump back in.
Great.
The magic of editing. So... So a couple things happen. She finds out that her father is closeted.
Yes.
She finds out things about his sexuality.
She finds out that he has had multiple affairs with men throughout his entire marriage to her mother.
Yeah, and before. And then 4 months after, he dies.
He dies. He
dies.
Yes, he dies.
He dies.
They have.
So she has a whole thing about what is true.
Yeah.
And he dies.
Right.
The nature of his death is something that is really one of the cruxes of the book.
Right.
Can something have multiple cruxes?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. Well,
sure.
It's one of them.
It's one of them.
Yeah, the nature of his death.
Yeah.
He got killed. He was crossing a road, jumped back into the road, and truck hit him.
Yeah. A bread truck.
And there is a question about whether it was intentional, whether he committed suicide, whether it was an accident. We'll talk about it.
Right.
So, that's the book.
Yes.
Now, the structure of this episode is going to be a little bit different than the ones we've done because this is the first time we're talking about something that was a comic book turned into a musical.
Right. In fact, I'm not sure, unless we do Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, I'm not sure there is another episode where we're going to talk about a comic book turned into a musical.
I'm pretty sure I don't know what you're talking about. So here's what we're going to do for this episode. We're going to go through every song in the show, and we're going to talk about them. And then when we get to the end, we're going to talk a little bit about what from the book didn't make it into the musical.
Yep.
And kind of our final thoughts.
Yes.
Sound good?
Yeah, you set that up beautifully, babe.
So let's go ahead and get started.
Cool.
So how does the show start?
So the show starts with... So I think we need to talk quickly about who the characters are in the show, because they're the same characters as in the comic book. And the writers of the show did a really cool thing with the sort of theatrical device that they ended up using, which is that Alison Bechdel herself is the character, but she's played by 3 different actresses, often at the same time. So one of them is present day Alison, who's 42 and looking back on her life and is a successful cartoonist. One of them is middle Alison, who is in her freshman year at Oberlin College. And then there's small Alison, who's about 8.
Right.
And so the story is kind of big Alison looking back on her life and watching her younger self experience these things that she's remembering. So it's very abstract. It's very abstract.
The staging of it.
Yeah, there's all this sort of stuff kind of swirls, and I will say, like, when they did it in New York on Broadway, they did it at the Circle and the Square Theater, which I've seen other shows at, and it is a theater in the round. And it also has like stadium style seating.
Right.
So the theater is way down at the bottom, and then the seating goes up. So there's really not a bad seat, and it's all completely in the round. And I feel like, and we saw it at the Boston Opera House, which is a huge, giant venue for touring productions. And
yeah, I feel like our viewing of it is going to come up a couple of times throughout the episode.
But
admittedly, we saw it in less than ideal conditions.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out that I would say that the ideal staging for this show is certainly more intimate than the setting that we saw it in.
Right.
Because it is a very intimate show. There's not very many characters. There's the 3 Alisons. There's 2 other little kids who are her brothers.
Right.
And then the mom and the dad. And her college girlfriend and her dad's underage paramour, and
that's it.
I think that's it.
A couple of them play other characters. Yeah,
but that's basically it. So the musical starts with a song called "It All Comes Back," which is basically Alison introducing herself, talking about the sort of the idea of memory and setting up what we're about to see. And I actually think that, talk about adaptation, like, I thought that was a great way to kind of introduce the storytelling of the musical in a very similar way as the way that the comic was set up. What are your thoughts?
Well, so there's two observations I had about the first song and what it changes and the way it has to present things. So when she's doing the comic book, she doesn't have to tell you, oh, by the way, this is a comic book. I'm a cartoonist. We know that. I'm literally holding it.
Right.
So there's like a whole other level that it has to go through in order to get translated into this medium. So they have to do a lot in that first song to give you what the structure of the rest of the show is going to be.
Right.
So there's this one line that keeps coming back throughout the entire show where she goes, caption, and then she says what the caption would be in the panel that she's drawing.
Right.
And that's something that's absolutely not in the book, because in the book, they're just captions.
Right.
So she doesn't need to do that.
But did you find that to be an effective sort of theatrical way of representing the fact that this was a comic book adaptation? Because in my opinion, the fact that it was a comic book was something that was really important to the creators that they didn't want to lose.
It is. My opinion of it, so as a comic book fan, I've spent years kind of watching comic books being made into things in other media.
Yeah.
Being done by people who say, well, it's based on a comic. It's got to feel like a comic. For any of our listeners who've seen the Ang Lee Hulk movie, it's kind of the best example I can come up with of someone in one medium trying to make it look like comics. And they literally went all out and made it look like panels and splash pages and things like that. And it doesn't really, it kind of famously doesn't really work that well. And this musical does a very, very similar thing. So a motif of comic panels shows up throughout the entire show.
Yeah.
It's a lot of lighting that's projected onto the stage to show actual comic panels. And I think the biggest one is caption. Here's my feeling on it. I don't like it. As a comic book fan, I feel like the show doesn't need it. However, I am already very familiar with the medium of comics.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of people who are seeing this musical aren't.
Yeah.
And maybe don't have that particular literacy. So I do see it as necessary. I don't like it, but I think it's necessary.
Well, and I also think, I guess I would say that the difference between those things is that the creator of the comic is a character, and the show, part of what the show is about is literally the process of her turning her memories of her life into a comic. So, like, that element of it exists, whereas adapting the Hulk, you don't care about the guy that was sitting there drawing it. Like, that's not part of the story. Does that make sense?
I think that's a perfect point.
Yeah.
Which is why at the end of the day I'm okay with it.
Right.
I don't like it, but I'm fine with it. I think it's
you're just kind of jaded about. It sounds like you're just kind of jaded about the that sort of use of comic imagery in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's absolutely valid.
Yeah.
So that's my first observation about it. The second thing is the way the show, and this is going to come up multiple times, the way the show will take one particular image from the book, something that maybe was in one panel or two panels, and say, this is something we absolutely have to expand on. So there's the very first scene in the book is she calls her dad, and, well, she doesn't even call her dad. She just says, when I was a kid, my dad would fly me. It's the thing, where the parents on their back and they put their legs up in the air, and the kid, you put your stomach on your dad's legs or your mom's legs, and they lift you up in the air and you spread your arms like you're flying.
Yeah.
That's like the first image from the book.
Yeah.
That is absolutely in the first song, and then it's brought back. The entire last song in the show is just about that image.
Yeah.
And it's drawn out into this big metaphor, which we'll talk about when we get to the last song.
Yeah.
But those are the two things that struck me. Like, the way it sets up the mechanics of the narrative in the show, I think are really, really good.
Yeah. And we can talk about that too when we get to the song Ring of Keys, because that was another example of something that isn't even mentioned. It's literally just an element from the drawing that the songwriter went, this is what I'm going to write the song about.
Yeah,
Not even anything that they're saying, just something in this one frame, this one panel. This is what I think the song is about.
If anyone's listening who knows the show, and we mentioned Ring of Keys, it might not surprise you that I think we're going to spend more time on Ring of Keys than anything else.
Yes, and luckily it comes about halfway through. So
yeah.
Okay, so we should move on.
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts about the first song?
No, those were sort of my thoughts. I like the way that it was set up. I do have actually something interesting about so we saw the touring production. And we're not going to talk too much about the actors because we kind of want this episode to feel like it's about the show rather than about the specific production that we saw.
Not so much feel like it. It is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's about the show.
We would like you to be able to listen to this even if you have not seen the specific production that we're talking about.
You weren't in Boston that one week?
Yeah. Oh, no.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's touring all around the country. But anyway, I am going to say one thing about it, which is that the actor who plays Big Alison, I think she's just called Alison in the script.
Yeah.
We can just call her Alison, and then
Right.
the other ones are Middle Alison and Small Alison. She's an actress named Kate Shindle, and there was a spot of controversy that I read about having to do with her costuming. So the actress who played Alison on Broadway is an actress named Beth Malone. And the way that she was costumed was literally, she was just wearing kind of like a baggy t-shirt and like cargo pants.
Yeah.
Because if you know what Alison Bechdel looks like, she is a very like butch styled person. She's a very androgynous looking person.
Yes.
I think she does describe herself as butch, which is why I say that. I wouldn't say that about someone that didn't identify that way.
Yeah, the author of Dykes to Watch Out For is
yes,
butch.
Yes, correct.
That's okay.
She's an androgynous looking human being.
Yes.
And very kind of thin, angular person, and Beth Malone actually looks a lot like her.
Yeah.
Kate Shindle doesn't look like that at all. Kate Shindle's very tall and quite voluptuous and quite curvy in her body. And the way that she's costumed is really different. They've got her like in sort of pants, but she's in sort of like more of a flowy shirt and like
she had like a jacket on,
like a jacket,
too.
like kind of like a jogging jacket, like the kind that you put your thumbs through, with like a little collar on it, like that you would buy at Athleta, like that type of jacket.
So what's the controversy?
So I read a headline that made it seem like bigger than it was. It was just some person wrote a blog post that they were mad because they thought that by costuming her in this way, they were de-gayifying Alison for like a more general audience.
Can
like
I say something?
Yes.
She looked super gay.
Yeah, well, because she's got my haircut and glasses, which is kind of a couple of different signifiers.
Yeah.
But
I hope that's not indelicate of me to say.
no, I don't think that's indelicate of you to say.
Okay, good.
It's a show about a gay woman. Like,
right.
We can say that she had some gay signifiers on her in the way that she was dressed in costumes. But it's not as, I guess it's not as androgynous, the costume.
Okay.
So someone wrote a blog post about it and said, you're pandering, and this is a show about a butch gay woman, and you femmed her up for mass audiences because you didn't think that a butch gay woman would appeal to Iowa or whatever, in the same way that this sort of very more femmy gay woman would.
I feel like, having seen the show, I'm not going to invalidate their criticism, but I will say I think there is enough in the show that Iowa might be uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
At least the Iowa that they're talking about.
Right.
That I feel like that argument doesn't hold a lot of
well,
water.
Anyway, my favorite part of this was that the creator of the show came back and was like, this doesn't even dignify my attention, but I'm just going to say it. It absolutely had nothing to do with that. The outfit didn't look good on Kate Shindle because she's 6 feet tall and has huge boobs. Like, they put it in a more delicate way.
I would imagine so.
I believe she called her a voluptuous Amazon.
That's nice.
But it was like she was like, I guarantee you what you're imagining in your head of what she would have looked like in a t-shirt. She didn't look butch. I'm just telling you. Like, so anyway, I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
That was kind of a funny thing that happened.
So let's move on to song number 2.
Go ahead.
What's next?
The next song is the next song on the recording is a song called Not Too Bad, which is just the dad looking in the mirror and sort of saying, I look good. I look okay.
Yeah.
It's
So,
not a long song.
Can I talk about the characterization of the dad?
Yeah.
So one of the things that you really get from the book is that this is a man who is he is not demonstrative. He doesn't show emotions. He is very, very obsessed with his appearance.
Yes, vain. I think you could say vain.
He's very vain. He's obsessed with appearances.
Yes.
His own appearance, the appearance of their house.
Especially the house.
Yeah, the house is a huge part of the story because it's something that he has fixed up over the course of years. He's done it all by himself. He's restored it to the way it looked over 50 years ago. But that's his whole thing.
Right.
And in this song, he's looking in the mirror saying, I don't look too bad. This is good. I could still break a few hearts.
Yeah.
Now, I have one thing I want to say about this song, but do you have any reactions to it?
No, you go ahead. It's a very short song.
This is one of the biggest things that I feel changed from the comic to the play. And I get it. I think I get it. I think I get why they did it. In the book, the dad Bruce Bechdel is very distant.
Yes.
Emotionally. He's very closed off. He has this one expression the entire book that is very stoic. It doesn't show anything.
And a lot of it is like a lot of it feels like he's kind of looking down his nose at you.
Yes. Yeah. In the show, he shows a lot more emotion than he does.
He's explosive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, everyone's kind of frightened of him because when is he going to explode?
Right. But he shows happiness more. He shows happiness at all, which he doesn't do in the comic. And so watching it, I'm thinking, like, I don't know that this feels like the same character. Mm-hmm. You know, there is Bruce Bechdel, the actual person,
right,
who only Alison and her family, I mean, we don't know him.
We don't know him. We cannot speak to the actual person. We can only speak to the character.
I only know 2 versions of him. I know Bruce Bechdel from the comic, and I know him from the show. And the version of him in the show didn't really feel like the guy in the comic. Mm-hmm. Now, I do think I understand why they changed him. I think if you're going to watch a 2-hour musical, if you're going to spend time in the same room with these characters, I think it would get very draining to watch someone who is not showing anything.
Yeah, you can't just have someone up on stage completely closed off. Like, the whole point of him is that he's completely closed off. But, like, that doesn't work theatrically, really.
Yeah, I mean, the more important things about, like, what part of his life he keeps from his family, that comes across. Mm-hmm. And so I think I get why the way he acts can be different. But that was my big reaction to that song.
Yeah, well, I have more to say about that when we get to his last song, but let's keep going for now.
Yeah, what's the next song?
The next song is I'm sorry. I went one further. So Not Too Bad comes after this, but the song is Welcome to Our House on Maple Avenue, which is
Question.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of tracks on it that are all like captions.
I'm not doing any of those.
I just wanted to make sure.
Because those aren't songs. Those are just scenes.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't listened to it, I also don't think that we're ruining anything.
No.
I think the experience of listening to it and reading it, I don't think suffer by us talking about it.
No, I
really
think so.
don't. So anyway, sorry. So you skipped a song.
Yeah, I skipped
Welcome
a song,
to
but
Our
now I'm
House on
going
Maple
back.
Avenue.
Welcome to Our House on Maple Avenue is a song that the mom, Helen, and all three kids sing because Bruce has just gotten a call that some important person in sort of the house restoration scene is coming over to see the house, which is very, very important. And they all have to run around and clean everything up and get it the way that he wants it. That's what keeps coming up again over and over in the song. He wants. And they all have to dress themselves in a particular way because he needs to show this perfect image of this perfect family living in this perfect house. It's something that's very important to him, and that they're all there to kind of serve that need of his. Which is kind of what you just talked about. Like, he's obsessed with appearances. Yeah. He's obsessed, like, that definitely comes across, and she talks about it in the comic, like, just we were all constantly being told to do things because he spent every waking moment like restoring this house.
I mean, it feels very, very musical theater.
Yeah,
in a good way. Mm-hmm. I really think in a good way. It does what the entire show does, is that it'll take one line from the book and say, oh, there is something in this. Mm-hmm. There is something in this that can be expanded into an entire song. Yeah. And does it really, really well. Yeah. That's the other thing. Oh, I love the book, and the musical's great. Yeah. We like both.
Yeah. I feel like this is a weird episode for us because we don't really have anything bad to say about either thing, which usually we have at least one thing that we didn't like. Yeah. And B, I don't know, like...
Yeah, this isn't like the episode where you find out we don't like gay people.
Yeah, no.
No, not at all.
And B, like, I feel like this is going to get a little personal. Like, my reaction to it was very personal, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to, like, not talk about the ways that I found it very personal.
Oh my God. Like, we've talked about the first 3 songs at this point, and I haven't even talked about the fact that I was in tears from minute 1. Yeah. Like, can I tell you the 2 things? Yeah. What are the 2? So when we were driving away from it, the 2 things that I said, here are the 2 things that make Jeremy cry. Yeah. 1, looking back on older versions of yourself, like looking back on childhood. Right. And seeing you don't know what's going to happen to you in the rest of your life. Yeah.
That's the idea of being yourself now, watching your younger self.
Yeah. Like physically watching your younger self. Yeah. That's a concept that absolutely hits me. But then the other is turning into your parents despite your best intentions. Yeah. Because there's a line when she says, you know, I'm gay. Like, that's my father. Mm-hmm. I'm gay and he was gay. And he killed himself at 42. And at 42, I'm a lesbian cartoonist. Right. Like, it's...
And she says, my dad and I were nothing alike. My dad and I were exactly alike.
Oh, my God. Yeah. And that just kills me. Yeah. So those are the first 3 songs. Yeah. So where do we go from there?
We're going to keep going. The next song is Come to the Fun Home, which shows... It's the 3 kids. It's just the 3 kids. And they're doing their... It's like they came up with a commercial. Yeah. So it's like a 70... Because it's in the 70s, right? Yeah. So it's like a 70s TV commercial about... getting
like if the Partridge Family lived in a funeral home. If the Partridge Family
lived in a funeral home and did a long-form commercial on TV about why you should go to their funeral home, that would be this song. Yeah. And honestly, it's a super cute song.
So and it's super fun.
The little kids were great, and it's super fun. I didn't get an equivalent to this song in the book. I never saw anything where they were joyful about being in the funeral home in the book.
I think this is something that the creators of the show, I think they brought to it. I really like the fact that they did, though, because I thought about it later. If that song wasn't there, this is a heavy show.
It's dreary from beginning to end.
It's really, really dreary. And so there's this, and then there's another one later.
Yeah, which also is absolutely not in the book anywhere, called... Well, we'll get to it.
We'll get to it. Yeah. And that, I really think it lifts up the mood. Yeah. And I think it does something very, very useful in the show that doesn't need to be in the book. Yeah. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that. But then the other interesting thing is immediately after it, we go straight into a scene which is pulled directly from the book, which is Allison's dad showing her her first dead body on purpose, and her wondering about why he did that. And the dialogue around that is directly from the book.
Oh, it's one of the best scenes in the book.
Yeah. It's so interesting. She's like, was it some, is this how his dad first showed him his first dead body? Is this like some sort of Bechdel rite of passage?
Some sort of Bechdel test, if you will.
Yeah, there you go. There it is. That was a joke that you made.
It's a good joke. And then
she's like, or maybe he just really needed the scissors, like, because he calls her in to give him the scissors.
Right.
Anyway.
But I think it's a good song. It's really cute, and I think it's useful in the show, even though it doesn't really have a corollary in the book.
I actually think, I think it's great, and also it's always fun to see little kids like singing, dancing, and doing a great job. Like that was fun.
And if anyone's listening who got a chance to see this particular touring company, the 3 kids we saw were great.
They were just so cute.
They're so good. Yeah. So that is Welcome to the Fun Home, or Come to the, what is it?
Come to the Fun Home.
Come to the Fun Home.
And then we almost immediately go into Helen's etude, which is Helen is the mother, and she's practicing piano, and basically her husband is seducing a young man like in the next room who came to help with the yard or something. And he's definitely a character in the book. Roy is actually a much bigger character in the book.
Yeah.
Like they go on vacation with him, and like he goes to New York with them, and he's like always around. Whereas in the musical, it's definitely implied in the musical that the mom knew what was going on much earlier on. In the book, you never really get the impression of when she found out that all this was happening. Well, you do. You know.
Well, no, I mean, she does tell Alison this is something that has been happening our entire marriage.
Right, but we don't know that she knew it was happening at the time that it was happening.
I always kind of read that she did.
Okay.
But you're right, it's not explicit.
Right, it's not explicit.
You're absolutely right.
And this is fairly explicit that she's like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Why is he in our house? What is he doing? I know what you're doing. And then she's in there practicing the piano, and it was just it's there's an image in the comic where she says our house was like an artist colony and we were all just doing our own thing, and there's sort of a cross section of the whole house and everybody's in a different room kind of doing their own pursuit. Like her mom's practicing piano and she's drawing, and her brother's playing his guitar, and her other brother is reading or whatever, and her dad is like off in this other room with this guy, like, and it's just interesting because, something that you think about is like, well, how could you have this whole other life and also be part of a family? And the way that she kind of sets it up is like, our family was never really together as a family. We just sort of all did our own thing. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question before we move on to the next song? How do you feel? We talked a little bit about how Bruce is portrayed in the show, about how her father is portrayed. How do you feel about the portrayal of her mom?
I think it's really similar to the book.
Yeah.
Because one of the things she talked about when she talked about the book, like some of the interviews that I saw, was she was like, because people have asked her, how did your mother feel about this book? Because her mother was still alive when the book came out. And she said, my mother was actually fine with it because it wasn't her story. Yeah. I never really went into she was just there. Like, I never really went into what she was thinking and feeling, which would have been the things that she would have felt important to be private.
Yeah. Like, I feel about her mother in the show exactly the same way I feel about her mother in the book, which is she is a flawed person who, I think, how do I want to say this? Her mother is flawed, but the journey she goes on is very understandable.
Yes. And
I don't think it's hard to identify with what the mom is going through in the book or in the show.
And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to. Like, I think it would be unusual to not know of someone or have someone in your family or someone who, like, later in life it was like, oh yeah, he was gay, and like his wife was really long suffering and it was nobody's fault really, but like he was just a really unhappy person. Like, I can get personal for a second. Like, that was my grandfather, and that was the 50s, not the 70s. But my father's father was gay. Like, he was married, and they had 4 kids, and he was a very, very unhappy person. Yeah. And it's hard to fault. I mean, you can fault someone because everyone's actions are their own choices. And if you marry someone and you're then like cruel to them, like that is your choice. Like you don't have to do that. Nothing makes you do that. But you can certainly understand sort of the way that people must have felt how important it was to not be themselves and the kind of pressure that puts on you. And then, you know, on sort of the flip side, living with someone who's under that kind of pressure and knowing that something's wrong and just, you know, thinking like, but it's, and, you know, there's a song about it later on. The mother has like a big song.
Yeah. So we should maybe we'll hold off and we'll get to that when we get to it.
No, but let me just finish my sentence, which is just like, I feel like I know that I have a duty to do this thing and I don't really know what's wrong and I'm just going to have to kind of trudge through.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it.
Mm-hmm. So what's next?
Next is, this was one of your favorite songs.
Which is?
Changing My Major.
Oh my God. Okay, so here's the deal. So there is a character in the book named Joan.
Yes.
This is Alison's college girlfriend.
First girlfriend.
Yeah. In the book, she's just kind of part of the tapestry of the story. But in the show, I think in kind of traditional musical fashion, she becomes a much bigger character.
Yes.
Like the idea that Joan was someone who was really integral to Alison's coming out in college is maybe implied in the book, but it's not subtext in the show, it's text.
Right.
Like Joan is what makes Alison jump out of the closet.
Right.
And I'm Changing My Major is great because it's the morning after they've slept together for the first time, and it's adorable. And it's just college-age Alison saying, in her underpants, just saying, I'm changing my major to Joan. I'm changing my major to sex with Joan, with a minor in kissing Joan. Yeah. And it's one of those things where I think it serves one simple purpose, which is this is when she came out. Yeah. This is how hard she came out of the closet. Yeah. As far as the song goes, it's a delight, but it's not really, I don't think it comes from the book. It just says that in the book, there's one page where she says, that semester, I didn't really pay attention to my classes. Right. Yeah. Right. The idea I'm changing my major to Joan, that was something that the people who made the show kind of came up with. Yeah.
Although actually I think that I was actually just flipping through the Essential Dykes to Watch Out For today, and there's a comic strip where someone asks the main character, who is a self-insert for Alison Bechdel, her name is Mo, and she says, Mo, what did you major in college? And she was like, I don't really remember, mostly getting high and kissing girls or something like that. And it's direct.
I mean, I think it's safe to assume, I would actually love to find out how much Dykes to Watch Out For informed. I mean, if you're going to write a show based on Fun Home, I'm assuming you went through and read all of Dykes to Watch Out For.
I would imagine.
And maybe we could find, if anyone knows anything about that, let us know.
Yeah, I mean, as far as things to personally identify with, like this might be a little too personal, but like the idea of like being 18 and in college and like, I don't actually know what's going on because I've never had really a chance to do anything in practice. I guess I'll just awkwardly look at you, you know, like it may, you know? Yeah. And like I, you know, who doesn't identify with being like sort of awkward teenager, like figuring stuff out?
I don't. I was amazing.
No, you weren't.
Awkward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So what comes next?
I've seen pictures. The next song is Maps. And that is one of the songs, I think that is one of the songs that's most directly related to a whole passage in the book. Yeah. Because she goes into great detail about sort of drawing the map of her dad's life.
Yeah. I mean, it really, like in the book, if you don't mind.
Please.
So in the book, there's this whole, you basically see one page where she says, I could take where my dad was born, the house he was born in, the house he lived in, where he worked and where he died, and I could draw a circle around the entire thing because it's all in one town.
And that's his life.
And that's one page in the book. And the people who made the show, being able to take that out and turn it into an entire song, I think it's one of the most effective songs in the show. Yeah. Yeah, I loved it.
It gives me the chills when I even think about it. And the other thing that she says is, we were 4 miles from the highway that goes from New York to San Francisco. Yeah. And that's literally the road not taken. Yep. Like, you stayed in this bubble. And actually in the book, it's even more detailed. Like not only did you not leave, no one left, because she shows this was where Grandma and Grandpa's house was. This was where my aunt and uncle's house was.
Yeah.
This is where my cousin and their sister, they built two houses in between us. And there's a panel of the mom and the kids watching like the prefab house go up in the field, and the mom saying, "Don't you dare move into my backyard when you're an adult.
Yeah.
Like I don't want that for you."
Mm-hmm. But it's a great song.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful song.
I really, really like it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So what's after that?
After that is Raincoat of Love, which is the other song that really has no connection to the book, I would say. It's more of it's like kind of a detachment fantasy of small Alison.
Yeah.
So she's like watching the Partridge Family or whatever, and her dad makes her turn it off. And then she kind of, because it's dumb, and she's like, no, it's great. And then they kind of go into this sort of Partridge Family style, and everybody's on stage, like, and everyone loves each other, and they're all wearing like horrible like 70s polyester clothes, and like it's just her fantasy of a little child of what a happy family looks like.
Right, which we are then immediately find out. We're immediately faced with the reality.
Yes.
That's not what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, but
right.
It's a fun song.
Yeah.
Unlike Come to the Fun Home earlier in the show, this one I think does double duty, because not only is it breaking up the kind of heartbreaking monotony of the show, it's very real. It's very, very real. Not only is it breaking that up, it's also it's doing something from a story perspective where you see, no, this is how young Alison pictures everything. This is how she wants it to be.
Right.
And we know now, because we're standing here with Alison, we know that that's not what it was.
Right.
But it's a good song. It's fun.
Right. But then immediately after that, there's not really a song in this part, but there's sort of this passage that happens in the book, which is basically they go to New York for the bicentennial, and it's Fleet Week. And so all of the sailors are in town. Mm-hmm. And they're staying at like her mom's friend's apartment, and she's not there. And the dad, like, basically Alison wakes up and her dad is on his way outside, and she says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Oh, I'm just going for a newspaper." And obviously he's like going out cruising because the ships are all in town.
Yeah.
And it's just really dark. Like in the musical, she's naming the scene, and she calls it like child neglect in New York or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's no song.
She's singing. She sings that title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She kind of and there's no song really that happens.
Well,
but
he sings her to sleep.
He sings her like a lullaby.
What's the song called?
Pony Girl.
Yeah, Pony Girl. So that's just his lullaby to her.
Yeah.
And then he leaves, and we presume to hook up with some sailors.
But it's one of those interesting things where it's like, thinking of memory, it's like at the time she had no idea what was going on, but watching her watch herself putting the pieces together, going, oh, that's what that meant. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's who Roy was. Oh, that's what Dad must have been doing when he left on the 4th of July night and left us alone.
Right.
Like all these things that she remembers. And then there's a scene too, and I don't think there's not a song about this, but we have to talk about it because it does happen in the musical. There's just not a song.
Yeah.
Is that her dad got arrested for basically picking up this underage boy that was in one of his high school classes because he taught high school English.
This was not in New York. This was back in their
hometown.
This was
back at home. And there's a scene where she's saying, "Where are you going?" And he says, "I have to go see a psychiatrist." Because he's been court ordered to go see a psychiatrist. And she says, "Why?" I mean, this is straight out of the book.
Yeah.
She says, "Why?" And he says, "Because I'm bad, not good like you." Mm-hmm. And again, like, as a kid, having no idea what that meant, but then as an adult looking back, remembering that and going, oh my God, like this is what was happening while I was like completely oblivious. It's just because the whole thing is about memory. It's about memory and like the accuracy of memory.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what comes next?
Next is, here we go. Next is Ring of Keys.
Okay.
Do you want to set up Ring of Keys?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the book, they go to a diner. She goes to a diner with her dad, and in walks, as she refers to, an old school butch.
Right.
Just this large woman.
She's delivering something.
Delivering
she's
something.
A delivery person.
A delivery person. She'd flannel and jeans and Doc Martens and short hair. And
what was the 60s? So I don't think it was Doc Martens, but yes.
Whatever. Boots.
Boots.
And little Alison sees this, and she goes, oh, I mean, essentially, oh, I didn't know that this is how a woman could live.
Right.
And it like awakens something in her. And there's the line, it's like I've been traveling around the world and suddenly I ran into someone from home.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try not to cry while we talk about this.
Oh, yeah. I think we both are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the show, the way they show it is there's only 3 characters who are on stage. Alison is at her drawing table.
Yeah.
And then in another part of the stage, little Alison is sitting at the diner table with her dad.
Right.
And so we never see this woman.
Right. We never see her.
But
in the comic, we see her.
In the comic, we definitely see her. And literally, this entire scene
She's
takes
on one page.
One page.
And she never even, and the name of the song is Ring of Keys.
Mm-hmm.
She never even mentions the Ring of Keys, but Alison Bechdel drew the Ring of Keys. And that
on her belt.
Yeah. And when they were writing the song, they looked at this picture and went, that's the thing that a little kid would really focus on is this big ring of keys and how important that makes her seem.
And I don't want to rob anyone of experiencing this song for the first time.
Yeah.
So I don't want to describe everything she says.
Yeah.
But essentially you have little Alison seeing this person and feeling so completely right looking at her and not understanding what to do with those feelings. And it's amazing.
Yeah, and this has gone into the culture. Like, people will ask each other, like, what was your Ring of Keys moment? Like,
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is like a queer culture thing now.
Really?
Yeah, totally.
Deservedly so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the notes that I had on it, so it makes me extremely emotional. Just watching this because it's like figuring out that there's other people like you in the world.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The thing that got me, and I had listened to this song a bunch of times, and it makes me cry every single time, and I cried when we saw it. But the thing that absolutely got me, like stabbed me to the heart, was I was watching the performance that they did at the Tonys.
Which I think says a lot about the song itself, that's the one they picked to perform at the Tonys.
Yeah, because it's a little kid that sings it, like it's a child actor that sings it, like...
Did you already mention that this... Yeah, you did mention at the beginning that this won Best Musical.
Yes. Maybe I didn't. I'm not sure if I mentioned it specifically.
No, you did, because it was the first Best Musical that was created by women.
No, it was the first Best Original Score that was created by women.
Oh, but it won Best Musical, too.
It won Best Musical. It won... Yeah, surprise. It won Best Musical.
It's very good.
It's very good.
So anyway, continue.
So they staged it when the original Broadway production, like I said before, it was staged in the round. And that was not how we saw it. We saw it in a more traditional theater. But when I rewatched the performance from the Tonys, and I realized that the way that it was staged, and I can only imagine that this was how it was staged also in the Broadway production because it's in the round. What ends up happening is because the little kid, instead of just having to face out one direction while she's singing, has to turn all the way around. So she sings towards every side of the audience.
She's like following the woman as she walks around the
diner. Right,
diner.
which is a pretty normal way to stage something in the round. You have to face at least part of the audience at some point. She ends up singing half the song directly to her older self.
Yeah.
And that was the part... that was the part that made me just weep. Like, the idea of being a little kid and looking into time and looking at your adult self and going, wow, I love that. I love that. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah,
and it's funny, you mentioned this to me and I had a different interpretation of it.
Yeah, yours was almost the opposite.
Mine was... this show is utterly subjective, which is one of the things I love about her, how much she talks about objectivity. It's not very objective.
Yeah.
It's very subjective. You're seeing this entire thing from Alison's perspective.
Yeah.
And I see it more as this is an adult looking back at a feeling they had as a child and basically feeling so secure in how right that feeling was that even though at the time they didn't know the feeling was right, this is their chance to look at it and say, no, that absolutely was the right feeling.
Right.
So I guess the difference is, and both of these are interpretations.
Right.
My interpretation is, no, young Alison never sees Alison, but that's not the important part.
Yeah. I know. I mean, my thought was like, Alison has, not literally,
No.
figuratively.
But it's all abstract anyway.
Yeah, but like Alison has become the thing that she herself is going, wow, I never even knew a person could be that way, but look how great you are. Like just the way that you take up space in the world is amazing to me. And
I mean, the staging of it is that perfect level of abstraction where we can each have an interpretation of it that makes us cry openly.
Yeah. No, and it made me think of like this is going to get a little personal, I guess. You at one point in our relationship had said to me something to the effect of like, if your 13-year-old self could see you right now, what would she think? And like I started to cry because I was like, I think she would be really happy, you know? Like it's hard to know when you're that age that everything's going to kind of come out the other side and be okay and you're going to be happy with your life. Like that's the whole like It Gets Better campaign, you know?
Of course.
Like it is hard to be a little kid or a teenager and think I'm never going to be an interesting, successful, happy person. And so to be able to like look down sort of a tunnel of time and see that in the future is really powerful to me. Yeah. The other thing, and this is pretty similar to what I just said, but like I'm going to just say like so I would say this is a coming of age story, right? And I think a lot of times in coming of age stories, particularly like LGBT coming of age stories, the sort of pivotal moment is like the first time you're attracted to someone. Yeah. As a younger person, or the first experience you have with someone. And of course we have that in like Changing My Major, but like it's very clear in Changing My Major that she knew she was gay before she had sex. She just had never like sort of put theory into practice, right? And the thing that I so appreciate about the way that this story is told is that the narrative isn't about I was attracted to someone and therefore I knew who I was. And you're nodding, so I think you know what I'm going to say. It's I saw the person that I wanted to be, and that's how I knew who I was. Yeah. And I think that is so much more powerful. I mean, anything, you know, I think
not to invalidate
the other, but I think it's more powerful, and I think it's more realistic. Yeah. Certainly for me. And I think it's really rare. I can't think of many examples of a narrative like that. So I just think that's great. Like, and I think that's part of the reason why this song is so emotional and for everyone who sees it, because everyone can find something about that moment of like, I knew something about myself that I didn't know before, and I understood it and I saw it for the first time. Like, I think that's amazing.
So what is our next song?
Next song is...
By the way, we made it through that entire section. I only choked up twice, and I didn't cry once.
Yeah, I think you only cried once?
No, I didn't cry once.
Oh, good job, babe.
But I got choked up twice.
High five. That's not going to translate into audio form. That was some Foley artist effect right there. This episode is not going to be very funny because it's just us like crying and saying how great all this stuff was.
But it's so good. This episode really is the fun home of episodes.
Oh, honey.
We're talking about real shit.
I know.
We're really getting into it.
I know. We're just
I just want to say this.
Therapy.
I may end up talking about this at the end, but something that I have felt for a long time, something I've kind of learned as I've gotten older, the art that affects me the most is not the most technically polished art. It's the most personal. Yeah. Like, if I see something and there is something personal in it that the creators are bringing to it, that is what gets me. Yeah. So that's why, like, you haven't seen it, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Yeah. All right? Big budget action movie. Here's the deal. There is so much that's personal in that movie that the filmmaker brought to it. And that's one of the reasons why I love it, even though it's a big comic book movie. Right. And it's why I love Loudon Wainwright, because he talks about some real shit. I could make a list of all of the people who make things that are super personal.
We just watched Patton Oswalt doing a stand-up routine about his wife's death.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's
holy
maybe
shit.
It's one of the best things I've ever seen him do, because he was willing to share himself.
Yeah.
Anytime a creator is willing to share a piece of themselves with their audience, that is what I respond to and appreciate.
Yes.
So Fun Home is kind of like, it is tailor-made for me.
Yes.
As a piece of art.
Well, the funny thing was, when we were going to see it and you said, oh, I don't know much about it. I said, well, I don't know if it's really going to affect you emotionally. And you said, why? And I said, well, it's about a little girl and her father. Like, I don't know. And you said, babe, empathy has never been my problem.
Yeah. Someone doesn't have to be exactly me.
Yeah.
I can empathize with them.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay, let's keep going.
Well, so what's the next song?
The next song is Days and Days, which is the mom's big song.
Mm-hmm.
And basically,
it's her big number.
It's heart-wrenching.
Yep.
And basically, middle Alison is home from college for a visit, and she has some time alone with her mother, and she basically says, I don't understand how you have put up with this for so long. Because I think it should be clear, like, not only is her dad gay and having affairs with other men, but he is extremely cruel to her mother. Extremely verbally abusive and awful.
I mean, that's the thing I was talking about at the beginning, is that the version of him in the show is like happier than the version in the book. You don't like him.
Yeah, no, you don't like him.
Yeah.
There's something creepy about it. But anyway, this is her saying, oh, how did it happen? It's just one day after another. Mm-hmm. You don't realize what it is until you look back on your life and realize your life is ruined. Mm-hmm. And then at the end she says, this is the part that gets me. She says, don't you come back here. Like, don't come back to this place.
Yeah.
This isn't for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't actually remember. Do they have this conversation in the book? I'm not sure they do.
Not really.
There's letters, sort of, and phone calls, but they never have this, like, sort of face-to-face sit-down.
No. Is any of this in Are You My Mother?
Not
the follow-up?
No, not really. Not really. I just reread it.
Okay.
Not really.
Yeah. I mean, if it is something that was brought to it by the makers of the musical, it was a good idea.
Yeah.
It's very...
You have to let Judy Kuhn have her moment. Come on, she's amazing.
It's one of these things where embrace the fact that this is a Broadway musical and go all out. And in a Broadway musical, this song is in there.
Yeah, totally.
And they do it incredibly well.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one thing about the staging of it that we saw. So, yeah, if you're seeing this, if you have seen this in the kind of traditional theater in the round sense... Or
untraditional, as the case may be.
Or exactly. Then the way we saw it is not what you saw.
Right.
But we saw it on a stage.
Like a proscenium stage.
Yeah. And I just want to bring up one thing of the entire way that they staged it for that venue. There's one thing they did that I loved, which is up until this time in the play, anytime you saw their house... It was very abstract.
Yeah.
It was basically a bare stage, but there was like a couch and a lamp and a desk and a chair. And you knew it was their house, and there was a piano. But then halfway through the show, they bring a flat down, essentially. That's like a brick wall.
Like a white brick.
And then they lift it when she goes home with her girlfriend, Joan. And they meet her parents, and... her mom does this song. You suddenly see the house again, but it's very, very realistic.
Yeah, it's like, it's not just like a chair here and a chair there.
Yeah.
It's like the entire thing, and you're seeing it through Joan's eyes,
basically. You see the wall, you see the carpets, you see
like
all the stuff
it's like
on
a
the walls.
mausoleum. Like, it's awful.
Yeah, and just... Here's the deal. If that's a choice they made for the touring show, because they knew they were going to be in proscenium style stages, it's one of my favorite parts of the entire show.
Yeah, because there's no way you could do that in theater in the round, because basically there's a big set piece that comes down in the middle of the stage, and they change the set behind it. So I don't know what it looked like in the round.
If you're going to do it in this style of stage, it works perfectly. Yeah. It's something I loved. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I thought it was really great taking this, again, just this abstract thought and making it more concrete, because for the first time, we're seeing it from the perspective of someone who's not a member of the family.
Right.
Because we're seeing it from, as you said, from Joan's perspective.
Right.
So I loved that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Then where do we go?
Telephone wire.
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
Ah, jeez.
Oh, no.
So the story of this song is
Can we talk about it in the book?
yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah. So in the book, there is a scene. It's when she's come home. It's in that several month period that we mentioned at the beginning where she has come out to her parents.
Yep.
It's before he has killed himself.
Yeah.
But she has found out that he has had affairs with men.
Right.
And they go home, and she and her dad take a ride. And where they go, maybe we'll get into where they're going, but that's not the important part.
Yeah, they just drive around.
The important part is she's in the car, and there's this one line where she says, I convinced myself at the next green light, I'll bring everything up.
Yeah.
We got to talk about everything. At the next green light, I'll say something.
Yeah.
And it's a really good scene. And unlike the other songs that were taken from like one image, this is multiple pages.
Yep.
This is a longer section of the book.
And they just never connect. Like, they just never really have the conversation that she wants to have.
Mm-hmm. So that's the book.
Yeah.
So
in the musical, for the first time, we get this sort of theatrical switch where older Alison gets to get injected into the actual plot.
Yeah.
So, like, middle Alison steps away, even though this would realistically be the middle Alison timeline, and older Alison gets pulled in. So it's like the end. I think that this is a tip of the hat to Our Town. I think it's like the end of Our Town, where Emily gets to go back after she's dead and have one last day with her family and like say all the things that she never meant to say. You're looking at me blankly. Are you familiar with Our Town? Okay. I don't know how you got through high school without ever being in Our Town. Theater nerds who listen to this are going to know what I'm talking about.
I did other stuff. I was in Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
I was in Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum.
Whatever. So she's now the one sitting in the car having this conversation with her dad, and she's singing like at the light, at the light, at the light, at the light. Like
the whole song is all of that internal monologue that we were seeing in the book.
Yeah.
It's her dad is not hearing any of this.
Yes.
It's her saying, I can't connect with you. I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
At the light, I will talk to you.
Like, and she can't bring herself to say anything, and he's just talking, and then she finally brings herself to say something, and she realizes he's not listening.
Yeah.
He's just lost in his own memory and reflection, and they never connect. Like, they just get home, and he goes inside, and that's it, and then that's the last conversation they ever have. And it's heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
If it's heartbreaking if you have parents, I imagine it's heartbreaking even more heartbreaking if you've lost your parents and never have that opportunity. I can say, so.
And so
he's laughing because he knows what I'm going to say.
You came home and you told me what you're about to say before I'd read the book or seen the show.
Right.
So I knew nothing. You were telling me there's this thing in the book, in the show, and this just happened.
So we have a dog, and every morning I drop our dog off at my parents' house because they take care of him during the day because he doesn't like to be alone. And so I am a 33-year-old woman, and I see my parents almost every day because they live 2 miles away. And
not in the town that any of you grew up in.
No, that's correct.
So I just want to make that clear.
Yes.
Yeah. We're not living fun home.
No. But I do see my parents almost every day.
Yeah.
And I dropped off my dog, and I was driving through traffic in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and listening to the song and crying. Mm-hmm. And it's about a girl having a car ride with her dad, not a girl, a woman having a car ride with her dad and never saying the things that are important to them. And then that's the last chance they ever had to have that conversation.
Because he was dead.
Because he was dead.
Soon after.
Yeah. So I got to my parents' house, and my dad was like, my dad goes, "Oh, great, you're here. I need you to give me a ride to the airport." And I went, "Oh, God." So I'm in the car with my dad after literally having just heard this song in the exact same situation as he is about to get on a plane, which is a risky business.
Yeah.
Going,
we know what planes do.
Yeah. What?
Never mind.
Just thinking like, "Dad, let's talk. What are your feelings? What are your fears? What are your wishes? What's your life all about?" And that was what my dad is fine. He's fine.
Mm-hmm.
He
yeah, Jeff's great.
He's great.
Yep.
And then it was It was funny because the day after we saw this, I went to pick up our dog, and my dad was standing in the kitchen, and he was like, "Oh, hi, honey." And I just like wrapped my arms around him. I was like, "Hi, Dad." And he was like, "Are you okay?" And then I got home and I said to you, my dad didn't understand why I was hugging him. And you were like, "What? Why?"
Because, I had not read or listened to it
No, that
yet.
was the day after we went. You just didn't understand the context.
Oh.
That was the day after we saw the show. I was still very emotional.
I couldn't remember what reason I didn't understand.
You didn't understand why I was.
But that's why.
That's why.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my relationship with my dad.
Mm-hmm. I have a good relationship with my dad. Larry's cool.
Larry's great.
Yeah, Larry's great.
What? Okay, wait. We're off track.
No, we're not. We're talking about Telephone Wire.
Telephone Wire.
It is a great song.
It's a great song.
It's a great song. And so one last thing, because I don't really have much else to say about it.
Yeah.
Other than it's great. You had one interesting reaction to it because, I mean, I'm sure this is the experience that so many people have with musicals is that, not everyone can go see these.
Right.
So many of us experience a musical first by listening to it,
right.
and then we see it.
Oh,
What
right.
was the thing you didn't know?
I didn't know that Big Allison sang it. I
Yeah.
thought it was Middle Allison because it would make sense to have it be.
Mm-hmm. How much did you cry in the theater during that one?
During that one, not much until the end. I really only was crying with actual tears during Ring of Keys. I will say, like,
because I was crying with actual tears that I brought from home myself
right.
throughout the show.
I will say,
artisanal tears.
You know this about me, and I feel like I have done it more since we've been together because you are so open and free with your emotions whenever we get to see anything. But I am not
I love
one
crying. It's great.
I know.
I feel my feelings really hard.
You really do, babe. It's really sweet. But I am not one to cry in a theater. I just don't feel comfortable. There's so many people around. Like, it's not me.
Yeah.
Like, I will absolutely cry at something like sitting alone on a couch or in my car that I would never in the theater actually cry with actual tears. And I have seen so many plays. I went to grad school for theater. So I have seen hundreds of plays, and I cannot remember actually crying, like crying, full out crying, before we saw Hamilton. Like that, I think that's the first play I have cried at. I just don't feel, it's not that I don't feel the emotion, it's that I don't feel like safe in the theater
right.
surrounded by strangers to cry. So what I'm saying is the fact that I actually was crying with tears running down my face during Ring of Keys is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hamilton, I just stopped through the whole thing. I just ugly cried through the whole thing.
I cry telling people about commercials I've seen.
Yeah, you do. Hamilton was the first play that not that this podcast is not about Hamilton.
No.
I ran out of
any
Kleenex. I was
is about
blowing
Hamilton.
my nose. It was so embarrassing.
It was gross. It was real gross.
It was so gross. Anyway, sorry, we're not talking about Hamilton.
No.
Maybe a future podcast? Do you think we could work Hamilton in somehow?
I'd probably.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
Or
we'll just keep bringing it up every episode.
I guess adaptation of someone's actual life counts as adaptation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
Do you want to
Telephone
finish
Wire.
Fun Home?
Let's finish Fun Home.
Okay, 2 more songs. We're
All right.
almost there.
What's next?
Edges of the World.
Okay.
That's the song her dad sings.
Yeah.
At the end, he's like super manic. He's trying to restore this house. It's basically in the form of like this sort of crazy letter that she gets from him.
So just super quick background. He died on the street outside a house that he had bought.
Like a mile down the road.
A mile down the road that he was restoring. And so in the book, it shows up in the book numerous times. He's basically taking a pile of like old sticks across the road, dumping them, and then he's going to walk back across.
Right.
And he is in the road and he gets hit by a truck.
Right.
In the show, that imagery is never there, which makes sense because there's the way he's presented visually in the show doesn't really match up with the way he's presented visually in the book. So
right.
I think it makes sense that it doesn't work like that. But it is very different.
Yeah.
Like his death is never shown.
No. But yeah, we just see him sort of having this kind of breakdown like in this house and like... And we hear about all of these letters that he's writing. And she says he's writing me like 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. And they're just these manic, long letters. Like we see that he's really breaking down.
Yeah.
And
which is why... Oh, no, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So here's the thing that we mentioned at the beginning. She defines 2 things about her father in very specific terms. He is gay and he killed himself.
Right. Both of which are which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because both of those are things we actually don't know.
We don't know that.
Yeah.
For all in, it is absolutely just as likely from the way she presents it that he was bisexual,
Yeah.
which is its own thing.
Right. As we
and
know.
got killed accidentally,
right.
which is its own thing.
Right. Right.
But, and this is what I'm saying, one of the things I love about the book and the show is the way it deals with objectivity versus subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about objectivity throughout. There's an entire song at the beginning where her dad, the very first song, he talks about how he needs to know what happened. He needs to know exactly what happened. And then she gets the refrain of that. And yet, my dad was gay and he killed himself.
Right.
These are absolutely subjective.
Right.
And in the book, she even, I can't remember whether this was in the show, but in the book, she talks very specifically about, I define my dad as gay.
Yeah, it wasn't in the show, it was in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I define him as gay, even though the facts don't necessarily bear that out, but I define him as gay.
Because I want to claim something about him for myself. Like, she says that.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be like him in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, she specifically says, I'm not calling him bisexual, even though maybe that would probably be more accurate. I'm going to say he was gay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, which again, make it personal.
Yeah.
You've got me.
Yeah.
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 I think it's great. No, but this kind of goes back to what I was saying during, his first big number at the beginning, which is the character of Bruce in the show feels different than the character of Bruce in the comic. Mm-hmm. Because in the show, he's a character. In the comic, he's just there.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the show, I mean, I've used the word manic a couple of times. Like, he's clearly like, there's something going on. And it's like, he's uncomfortable to be around because he's so over the top. Like, by the end, like, he's like kind of charming her girlfriend that she brings home, and like he's being very like, hey kid, like just all of this stuff, and like he's just falling apart. Like, he's falling apart, but like very openly falling apart.
Yeah. And then he dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the very last song in the show, Flying Away. Mm-hmm. I think this is the most beautiful song in the show.
It really is. And again, it is, there's one image that's in the comic that got turned into a big
a projection.
Set piece in the beginning.
Right.
And then the entire last song is about that one image.
And did you see they projected it up on the wall?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the only scene from the comic that we ever see.
And that was in the version we saw, but do we know that was in the other versions?
I think it was.
Okay.
I don't know for sure. If someone saw it on Broadway, they should write in and tell us.
Yeah, please let us know.
But I think I read that it was. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the three Alisons sing together.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this like, apart from the content of the song, it's one of the most beautiful like 3-part harmony songs I've ever heard.
Yeah. And it's all about flying over their town and looking at everything and taking a bird's eye view of things. That's kind of fundamentally, that's on the surface, that's what it's about.
Yes,
that's
but
not the
also
subtext
looking
of it,
at your
obviously.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will be totally honest. By this point in the show, I am all emotioned out.
Yeah.
And this, to me, wasn't emotionally, it doesn't really exist at the level that a lot of the other songs do.
Yeah.
But I don't think it needs to.
Yeah, I think it's just a very pretty song.
Yeah.
Like, we've heard all of the stuff. Like, everything has already happened. This is just a very pretty song to wrap everything up.
Yeah.
Also, the show is an hour and 40 minutes with no intermission, and by this point in the show, I had to pee very much.
Yes.
So
we're glad that it was over.
We were glad that it was winding down.
Yeah. So what do you have anything else you want to say about the last song? Because I really like it.
No, I think it's very pretty. I think this song you could listen to out of context and you would find it to be just a very pretty song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
am a sucker for close harmony. Mm-hmm. I love this song sounds more like, like the Indigo Girls or Girly Man or like any of the sort of like lesbian close harmony acts that I listen to than any other music in the show, and I'd like to think that it was inspired by some of them.
So that's the show.
Yeah.
That's the musical.
Yeah, and it won at the Tonys. Best Musical, Best Book, Best Original Score, Best Direction, and Best Leading Actor for Michael Cerveris, who played the dad. And all 4 women were nominated, but they I think they split the vote.
Yeah.
So Beth Malone, who plays Big Allison, was nominated for Best Actress, and then
both the Little Allisons
right? And the mom were nominated for Best Supporting.
Gotcha.
But it went to someone who was in The King and I.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is The King and I.
It's fine. I believe she was the first Asian American actress to win Best Featured Actress in a Musical.
Well, I definitely don't want to take that away from her.
I would not like to take that away from her.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
Deep cuts.
That's okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so was there anything that's in the book that's not in the musical that you feel like you want to talk about?
You know, the funny thing is, going into this, I said that there were going to be things that I wanted to talk about that weren't in the book. But really coming to it now, there's one thing that didn't make it in, and this is what happens in every adaptation of a book to anything else. It's all about details.
Yeah.
There are so many details that are in the book that are not in the show.
Obsessively detailed, you might say.
Oh my God, it's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Like just from that perspective, it's wonderful. And there are really great scenes that I remember of her actually going to visit her dad's grave.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we don't see in the show at all, is we don't really see much of her life post her father dying.
Right.
Really, the timeline of what we experience is her childhood up till her father dies, and then her as an adult.
Right.
There's nothing really in between. And there's some really great scenes in the book of her, like, she comes back from the summer and she's talking to someone else at school, and they say, "How was your summer?" And she goes, "Oh, I did this and this." And she starts laughing and she goes, "Oh my God, what am I talking about? My dad died." And he says, "I mean, you're kidding, right? You're laughing." And she goes, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not kidding at all. It totally happened." And it's a great scene in the book.
Yeah.
We don't see any of that stuff in the show.
No.
And honestly, I think it's valid.
I think it's great. Yeah. No, it's fine. It's interesting that you say, like, there's a part in the book where she goes to see her dad's grave, because there was something that I saw in an interview that I guess the cast had all gone and seen, like, the actual house and spent a night there. Yeah, the Broadway cast.
Yeah.
And they had gone out and seen Bruce Bechdel's grave. And the way that she's drawn it, there's like this sort of row of trees behind it. And they were standing there and someone said, well, I guess she must have just put in those trees for like an artistic embellishment. And Alison Bechdel got really mad, and she was not mad, but like she got mad, and she was like, "No, those were there. I tell the truth. Someone pulled them out."
Yeah.
But like just like the idea of her saying each panel is the truth. This is the truth. I don't know how to tell my story any other way than the truth. I didn't fictionalize it. I like, she's basically like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, this is what happened. It's just really powerful, I think.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, for me in closing, I think the book is fine and the show's okay.
Yeah, we liked it all right.
Yeah, we liked it.
We had no emotions.
This is one of the best comics I've ever read. And as far as seeing a show, this is one of the few experiences I've ever had reading the source material and then immediately being able to go and see the show. I don't think I've ever had that before.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really amazing experience that I'm really glad I got to have.
Yeah. So I think it goes without saying that on our Matrix, this was an excellent adaptation made by people who loved the source material.
Yeah.
It's way up in that corner. Would you not say so?
I would say so.
Especially given that the person that created the source material was heavily involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see the next one they're going to do about Are You My Mother?
That's, having reread that yesterday, I think that would be even more challenging to make a musical out of, but you know, if anyone can do it, it's these folks.
It was great. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say?
No, I think that's it. Do you want to tell, we'd love to talk, especially if like anyone saw the musical or knows this comic and has thoughts. We'd love to talk to you about it. Do you want to tell how people can get in touch with us?
Yeah, please. So you can get at us on Twitter at AdaptCast, on Instagram at AdaptCast. You can email us at adaptorperishcast@gmail.com, and you can find us on the web at adaptorperishcast.com. That's, websites usually end in .com. It's just a .com.
Good job, babe.
It's a .com. I wanted to do .pizza, but you wouldn't let me. That is the subjective truth, not the objective truth.
And on that note, bye, everybody.
Bye.